Good day, everyone. Today I am going to tackle the topic of philosophy of education, schools and thought, existentialism, phenomenology, and education. But first, let me introduce myself to you. I am Angel Kate M. Cabido, your discussant for this topic. So, what is existentialism? Existentialism starts with the question of why I am here. Why do I exist? What is my purpose in life? And what is my essence? So, from the Latin word ex means out, plus ter means to stand, equals to exister means to stand out. We can also say that existence is to appear, to arise, to become, to be. So next, what is essence? It is the meaning, purpose, what it is, and the nature. Next slide. So now, what is really existentialism? So it is the modern philosophical view which takes the Tao as its starting point. Tao is a Chinese word that has different meanings but is typically translated as way or path. It is subjective. Humans possess a free will and stand in an absurd and meaningless world or universe. And in existentialism, every individual is unique. So next slide. So, this part, existentialism, means individuals have to take responsibility for their own actions and shape their own destinies. So, next slide. Existence precedes essence, which human persons do not possess the essence. They make choices that create their own nature. Next slide. So choice is vital and inevitable to human existence. Even the refusal to choose is a choice. Also, freedom of choice of an individual entails risk, responsibility, and commitment. And according to Sahakian, at birth, man lacks human nature. Man creates himself. What he is, he himself made. Man is only what he himself wills himself to be. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. Will means a choice. It enables man to make a conscious of what he will be. Choice or decision makes one responsible for the effects of his choice, not only to himself but also to others, since his choice also affects other people. Human existence is the starting point of thinking. Next slide. Alright, so let's see what existentialism deals with and values of existentialism are. So here, existentialism deals with concreteness of experience, personal concern, commitment, and uniqueness of the individual. While the existentialism values are the freedom of choice, the individual dignity, the personal love, and the creative effort. Next slide. So, existentialism on metaphysics, epistemology, axiology, and educational implication. In metaphysics, it's about existence creates essence. In epistemology, it is about knowing is to make personal choices, to choose or appropriate what I want to know. Existentialism on axiology, values should be freely chosen. And in educational implication, classroom dialogues stimulate awareness that each person creates self-concept through significant choices. Next slide. Alright, let's proceed to the existentialist philosopher and their thought. So among the best-known existentialist philosophers are Soren Kierkegaard, Martin Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Martin Buber. So next slide, let's have first Soren Kierkegaard. He is a Danish philosopher born in Copenhagen. He is the father of existentialism. According to him, human existence is always unique and never social in nature. Moreover, as an individual, man functions, grows, develops, makes decisions, suffers, experiences intense feelings, and confronts God. And according to him, life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. Next slide. So we have the second philosopher, Martin Heidegger, a German philosopher whose work is associated with phenomenology and existentialism. His ideas have exerted influence on the development of contemporary European philosophy. According to him, every man is born as many men and dies as a single one. So next slide. The third one is Jean-Paul Sartre. He is a French philosopher and principal spokesman for the existentialist movement in post-war France. He is an aesthetic existentialist and also the best-known philosopher of the 20th century. His idea is existence precedes essence, which essence is created by existence. Human nature is a product of existence. Like for example, man first exists without purpose or definition, but finds himself in the world and only then, as a reaction experience, defines the meaning of life. So next slide. So according to him, since there is no God or designer to give man a purpose, it is up to the individual to choose the life they think best, and we are responsible for everything we do. Man is condemned to be free, and the destiny of the man is placed within himself. Next slide. So we have another one. So Martin Buber. He often labeled an existentialist. Buber rejected the association. Martin Buber was a Australian Jewish philosopher best known for his philosophy of dialogue, a form existentialist centered on the distinction between the I and the relationship and the I and it relationship. The I and the relationship is characterized by mutuality, directness, presentness, intensity, and inevitability. Buber's major theme is that human existence may be defined by the way in which we engage the dialogue with each other, and with the world, and with God. And according to him, all journeys have secret destination of which the traveler is unaware. Next slide. So, existentialism in modern life. Next slide. So, existentialism has affected many areas of thought. Existentialism can help people better understand themselves as individuals and in relation to others in the world. Although it has its limitation, it can be valuable to help clients better identify their values and make choices to create their most meaningful life. Next. Okay. The central idea is that people should encourage to make their own decisions, respect themselves, and treat others with compassion. Existentialism of the modern life is full of paradox and contradiction, and no single lifestyle is necessary the true one. To reorganize the existentialist frame of reference is to reorganize individual differences and variation. Next slide. Alright, let's move on from existentialism to phenomenology. So what is phenomenology? Next slide. So the basic definition of phenomenology is the lived experience. In a more detailed look, phenomenology is not interested in modern sciences, focused on simplification and reducing phenomena to abstract laws. It examines how people describe things and experiences through their senses. So Mustakas is a major name in phenomenology today, which is said that phenomenology is to seek to understand human experiences. Next slide. So phenomenology focus on the concept or phenomenon to reduce individual experience with a phenomenon to a description of the universe essence. Next slide. So units of the analysis of phenomenology is the primary people, but also art, literature, poetry, biographies, novels, diaries, and so on. Next slide. Alright, let's go with the phenomenological philosophers and their thought. Next slide. So let's start with Edmund Husserl. Husserl argues that in order to answer the question of how we can have the world, we ought to turn our attention to the study of our experience of it. In addition, phenomenology experience is directed through particular concepts, perception, thought, memory, and imagination, and etc. Also, Husserl came up about intentionality, the directedness of experience toward things in the world. These make up the meaning or content of a given experience and are distinct from the things they present or mean. Next slide. And according to him, phenomenology rejects positivism. This can be achieved through the reduction or epoche. The meaning of epoche, according to Husserl, it is the moment in which we break free our everyday experience of the world and transcend the experience to discover meaning. And there is natural attitude, our everyday involvement in the world, and phenomenological attitude, the philosophical act of pure reflection where we suspend the natural attitude. And according to him, knowing is always and only through a state of pure consciousness. The mind is directed toward objects of consciousness that can be reflected upon. Next slide. So Husserl quoted back the things themselves. So in this idea, Husserl meant the entire field of original experience, which in next slide. So ingon pa ni Husserl back to the things themselves. So example, as what do we experience this hammer? Diba it is many things to many people, right? So to a carpenter, it is a tool. To a retailer, it is a merchandise. To a killer, it is a weapon. To a lecturer, it is a prop, and more. It's how we experience things and back to the things we experience it. Edmund Husserl also describing experiences, feelings, emotions, fantasies, and dreams. Next slide. So he also tackled about the intentionality of consciousness. So every conscious act intends something. Consciousness does not just adapt itself to the object passively, but rather its every essence is to form meaning, to give meaning to the object. So next slide. So in order to draw distinction between these two different ways of experiences of the world, Husserl employed two Greek items. So the noises, this is the intentional process of consciousness. Phenomenology also describes the object of consciousness. And noema, the ideal context of noises, is noema. Phenomenology also describes consciousness itself. In other words, the subject of the object is the noises, and the object of the subject is the noema. Next slide. The phenomenological reduction. So therefore, in this part, if we are to gain knowledge about the object of consciousness, we must first examine consciousness. The consequence of this is that consciousness is the precondition for knowledge. Next slide. So this moment is transcendental. If the epoche is the name for whatever method we use to free ourselves from the captivity of the unquestioned acceptance of the everyday world, then the reduction is the recognition of that acceptance as an acceptance. Next slide. So, let's go with Martin Heidegger. Martin Heidegger disagreed with Husserl's apotry, an effort to get beneath the subject experience and find the genuine objective nature of things. He focuses on the relationship between the event and the person and how meaning is formed in that relationship. Next slide. So leads to endless possibilities and endless interpretations. And our relationship with things is not object-subject relationship. And for Heidegger, the transcendental turn was the wrong move for phenomenology. Also, Heidegger proposed that phenomenology was fundamental ontology. So next slide. So let's tackle about ontology. If epistemology seeks to answer the question, how can we have knowledge? While the ontology seeks to answer the question, what is being? Heidegger concurred with Husserl that neither radical empirism or rationalism would provide a solid understanding of our experience of the world. Next slide. So against from Husserl, for Heidegger, however, the goal of phenomenology was not to allow an access to the things themselves. The goal of phenomenology was to make transparent the being of being transparent of the being for whom being an issue. So next slide. Heidegger seeks to describe this entity we call being Dasein in its average everydayness. He denotes the categories of experience as existential in answer to the question, what is being? Next slide. So, Heidegger replies that a fundamental and reflective approach to descriptive phenomenology reveals the following categories of being. First is being in the world, means being in the world is by its very nature oriented toward meaning and growth, while it characterizes the type of being of all human. It is also unique for every person and can be seen to be offering an explanation of what in other psychological traditions might be called identity or self. Second, being with others. This means that being in the world is being with other people. That signifies that we are with other beings in a way more complex than we are being alongside beings. Third is being towards death. Means to be is to be. One of the fundamental facets of being is the fact that all being is being towards death. Next slide. So let's go with the third phenomenology philosopher, Maurice Merleau-Ponty. His aim is not to find a common theme, but the goal is to concentrate it upon re-achieving a direct and primitive contact with the world. Describe everyday experience as it is perceived by the consciousness of individuals. He defines phenomenology as the study of essence, including the essence of perception and consciousness. Next slide. So he concentrated on the primacy of perception. So perception is the background of experience which guides every conscious action. Also, he argues that both traditional empirism and rationalism are inadequate to describe the phenomenology of perception. Next slide. So, what is empirism and rationalism? Empirism maintains that experience is the primary source of knowledge, and that knowledge is derived from sensory perceptions, while the rationalism maintains the reason is the primary source of knowledge, and that knowledge does not depend on sensory perceptions. Next slide. In this part, perception may be structured by associative forces and may be focused by attention. Next slide. Merleau-Ponty concludes by defining freedom as a mood of consciousness in which personal actions and commitments can be chosen within a situation or field of possibility. Freedom is always within a given field of possibility. Freedom is always present in a situation, and this will lose our belonging to the situation. Freedom is a made or mood of being in the world which enables us to transcend ourselves. Next slide. And the last is about phenomenology and hermeneutics. Hermeneutics means the art of understanding and the theory of interpretation. And knowledge is central to hermeneutics because it is through language that fruitful interpretation and meaning are secured. In Heidegger's analysis of Dasein, as he put it in the basic problem of phenomenology, in speaking about something, the Dasein speaks itself out, expresses itself as extant being in the world, dwelling with and occupying itself with beings. However, hermeneutics does focus on the internal process of using language. As Gadamer puts it, hermeneutics is primary of use where making clear to others and making clear to oneself has become blocked. Let's proceed to the existentialism and phenomenology in philosophy of educator. Because of existentialism is a prototype of philosophy, many of its adherents have not been overly concerned with methodology and systematic exposition. Some philosophers, however, have been phenomenology as providing a rigorous methodology for describing lived experience, and hermeneutics as providing an interpretive approach to individual experience. Next slide. Let's start with the aim of education. It is to help students to understand and appreciate themselves as unique individuals who accept complete responsibility for their thoughts, feelings, and actions. Next is to educate the whole person, not just the mind, since feelings is not divorced from reason in decision making. And last is to help the learner become fully his authentic self. Next slide. In here, teachers remain non-judgmental and take care not to impose their values on their students, since values are personal. Through values clarification strategy, the learners will be able to practice sound moral reasoning skills, choose the appropriate response for a value conflict, and commit themselves to personal, moral, and societal values. In addition, values education is a matter of choice that goes throughout existence. Next slide, existentialist curriculum. Learning is self-placed, self-directed. Students are given a wide variety of options from which to choose. Also, students are afforded great latitude in their choice of subject matter. And the humanities are given emphasis to provide students with various experiences that will help unleash their own creativity and self-expression. It is composed of fine arts, drama, creative expression, literature, and philosophy. And also vocational education is seen more as a means of teaching students about themselves and their potential that of learning a livelihood. Next slide. As a future educator, role of the teacher is very crucial to do for the needs of their students. To relate with each student openly and honestly, to create an environment in which they freely choose their own preferred way, and to help students define their own essence by exposing them to various paths they take in life. And also, it is important to assist and guide the learner in the process of becoming intelligent, sensitive, choosing, and acting individual who knows the obligation and responsibility of freedom. And also to help the individual identify and know himself better. Teachers are also making a questionnaire, poster of alternatives, and identifier of choices who challenges the learner to become fully existent. Next slide. So the role of learners is also important to see what they really needs to be treated as an individual and to perform freely. So to freely choose what subjects they want to study as long as they are interested in it, and to define their own essence or meaning of life. Next slide. Alright, so the critique of existentialism and phenomenological in education. The existentialism and phenomenological philosophers seek to open our eyes to human possibility and not necessarily to make narrow doctrinal ideologies out of us. Such an outcome would be anathema to the letter and spirit of existentialism and phenomenology. Next slide. So thank you for listening and God bless everyone.